dédé àsìkò yìí o ẹ̀yin èèyàn ìsàkété ìlú tí ń sọ̀rọ̀ sí yín gbogbo ìgbà ni mo ń fún tí West Africa Democracy Radio.
Shekka muna a Najeriya. Ku saurari WADR.
West Africa Democracy Radio.
Je suis à Dakar, au Sénégal, et j'écoute la WADR 94.9 FM.
West Africa Democracy
West Africa Democracy Radio.
We are West Africa Democracy Radio.
94.9 FM.
Dakar, Senegal. It's you speaking.
WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and 7 o'clock in Lagos. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio. Broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, our top stories. Ivorian opposition parties react to President Ouattara's Independence Day address.
And as we draw close to the election day, more of that tension will increase, violence will erupt, because like we all know, Côte d'Ivoire has an history of electoral violence.
Guinea-Bissau President Embalo dismisses government, appoints new prime minister ahead of elections. Ghana mourns as government honors victims of fatal helicopter crash.
It's traumatic, because all three of them were very close to me. They were my very good friends. So it's very difficult talking about them, knowing that, they are departed. It's extremely difficult for me.
And Martin Luther King movement denounces recurring ban on public demonstrations in Togo. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
My name is Sankule Janko, and welcome to this broadcast. We begin in Côte d'Ivoire because just hours after President Alassane Ouattara's Independence Day address marking 65 years since Côte d'Ivoire's founding, opposition parties wasted no time in responding. They slammed the speech as disconnected from everyday realities and filled with self-congratulations. Christopher Atichi completes the story.
The first response came from the Ivorian Popular Front (FPI), led by Pascal Affi N'Guessan. In a statement posted on its official website, the party remarked, "For Alassane Ouattara, everything is perfect in the best of all possible words in Côte d'Ivoire." The FPI strongly rejected the president's portrayal of a resilient economy and significant national progress, calling it a denial of the country's true social and economic challenges. Meanwhile, the African People's Party Côte d'Ivoire, PPACI, founded by former President Laurent Gbagbo, echoed similar sentiments. In its statement, the party dismissed the president's address as embarrassing self-congratulation disconnected from the reality. The PPACI went further, calling the speech an insult to the poverty and precarious conditions in which millions of Ivorians live. The party also condemned what it referred to as a de facto coup d'etat in reference to President Alassane Ouattara's bid for a fourth term. The PPACI concluded by honoring soldiers who died defending the constitutional order, as well as those imprisoned for the same cause. As of now, the Democratic Party of Côte d'Ivoire, PDCI, another key opposition force, has not issued a response. The ruling RHDP party has also remained silent. With less than 3 months until the presidential election, the political climate in Côte d'Ivoire is growing increasingly tense, and political actors are seizing every opportunity to make their positions known.
A report from WADR's correspondent Marcel Ariston Blay in Abidjan, voiced by Christopher Atichu. Meanwhile, analysts and experts have also weighed in on President Alassane Ouattara's address to the nation on the occasion of the country's 65th independence anniversary. Among the analysts is Austin Egbe, Wadr's liaison officer to ECOWAS, who warned of a potential uprising following the history of electoral unrest and the political fractures in Côte d'Ivoire.
And as we draw close to the election days, to the election day, more of that tension will increase, violence will erupt, because like we all know, Côte d'Ivoire has an history of electoral violence, and this election coming is not going to be an exception, because the factor that always lead to violence remain constant, which is President Alassane Ouattara. His bid is already creating an uncertainty in the political architecture among the Ivorian people. And its deliberate omission of the opposition in that speech is a clear signal that there is no opposition right now in this country.
Well, do join us in our guest segment for the full conversation on that. Meanwhile, let's head to Guinea-Bissau, because in a move that reshapes Guinea-Bissau's political landscape just months before national elections, President Umaru Sissoco Embalo has dissolved the government led by Prime Minister Rui Duarte de Barros and named Brahima Camara as his successor. The surprise decision, announced via presidential decree, comes without any official explanation, raising concerns about the timing and motivations behind the reshuffle. With legislative and presidential elections scheduled for November 23, the change in leadership is expected to influence the tone and direction of the campaign period. Francis Boniface has more in this report.
The decision, formalized in a presidential decree dated August 7, 2025, did not include any explanation for the dismissal. A second decree issued the same day confirmed Camara's appointment as the new head of government. No official timeline has been announced for his swearing in. This unexpected change comes as the country prepares for crucial legislative and presidential elections set for November 23. President Embalo and Brahima Camara share a long political history, having both been key figures in Madem G15, a party that formed following a split from the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, PAIGC, their former political base. The alliance, however, fractured after Embalo took office, revealing divisions within the political coalition. The latest shake-up is expected to have significant implications for Guinea-Bissau's political dynamics in the weeks leading up to the polls.
Francis Boniface with that report. It's a somber day in Ghana as the country continues to mourn the loss of 8 lives in a tragic military helicopter crash. Among the victims, 2 cabinet ministers, high-ranking officials, and military personnel. A solemn ceremony was held today at the seat of government in Jubilee House, Accra, to honor their memory. Accra correspondent Nadi Tete has more in this report.
A flower-laying and candlelight ceremony was held Thursday afternoon at the Jubilee House in Accra to honor the 8 victims of the recent military helicopter crash that has plunged Ghana into national mourning. The solemn event, part of a 3-day official mourning period, took place at the ceremonial garden. Families of the deceased, government officials, military personnel and members of the public gathered in grief and remembrance. Among the victims remembered were Defense Minister Dr. Edward Omane-Boama and Environment Minister Dr. Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed. Others include NDC Vice Chairman Dr. Samuel Sapon, Deputy National Security Coordinator Alhaji Muniru Limuna Mohammed, and former parliamentary candidate Mr. Samuel Abuaji. 3 members of the Ghana Armed Forces also perished: Squadron Leader Peter Bafemi Anala, Flying Officer Chum Ampedu, and Sergeant Ernest Adomensa. In the wake of the tragedy, President John Dramani Mahama has appointed Finance Minister Dr. Kasiala Tuforsen and Land Minister Emmanuel Amakofi-Boa as acting Defense and Environment Ministers. The Z9 Air Force helicopter went off radar en route to Obuasi on Wednesday and crashed in the Ashanti region. All 8 on board were killed. President Mahama, who was scheduled to attend the same event, reportedly changed plans last minute. The crash remains under investigation.
Our correspondent Nadi Tete with that report. Meanwhile, some senior government officials, including Attorney General and Minister for Justice Dominic Aye, former Minister of Youth and Sports Elvis Afrey Ankara, and flag bearer of People's National Convention PNC Bernard Mona, who attended the solemn ceremony, shared their thoughts on their former colleagues who died in the tragic accident.
is traumatic, because all three of them were very close to me. They were my very good friends. So it's very difficult talking about them, knowing that, they are departed. It's extremely difficult for me.
I cried. I wept. I can't hide it. I wept. I cried because Omane Buama in 2008, when I was the Deputy General Secretary in charge of operations, he was like my closest ally. All the operations, we were together. Now, recently, he showed me a book that he had written for Professor Mills, and he said he was going to launch it at the end of...
Peaceful Man.
Yes, and that I feature in that book. And I was asking, what have you written about me? Let me know. And now I'm wondering what is going to happen to that book.
I have worked with them, as I said, and these two gentlemen, virtually of my age, I can say that they died without being corrupt, that they died and they would not have taken any dime from anybody for their good, rather than for the good of humanity.
Some senior Ghanaian government officials there.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Elsewhere in Guinea, significant preparations are underway ahead of the constitutional referendum scheduled for September 21, 2025. On Wednesday, the General Directorate of Elections, DGE, held a meeting with various political parties and civil society organizations to establish the Inter-Party Committee. This committee will serve as a framework for technical consultation and dialogue aimed at involving all socio-political actors in the electoral process. While several political parties welcomed this initiative, some groups chose to boycott the ceremony, criticizing the government for what they perceive as a hurried approach. Abdullah Hassan completes the story.
The meeting between the General Directorate of Elections and political parties was marked by the establishment of an inter-party committee. This consultative body aims to promote transparency and consultation around the referendum process. At the end of the conference, Junabu Kamara, Director General of the elections body, made these remarks.
The
technical committee is a space or a framework for technical consultation, information and exchange of all social and political actors. The parties also take part to allow the General Election Board to inform, exchange and gather the opinions and suggestions of political parties, civil society organizations, national institutions, political parties, but also technical and financial partners on the different stages of the electoral process. Among the participants were political leaders who welcomed this approach by the General Directorate of Elections, DGE, which they described as democratic. Buana Keita and Usman Dadi Kamara are presidents of the Rally for a Prosperous Guinea Party and the Coalition for Democratic Change. The government has made a great step, so this step, that is, I am sure that this committee will dignified represent the political parties and the nation. We have seen that democracy is starting to come in our country.
This committee is part of resolutions of the Inter-Guinean dialogue, so we are very happy to see that the government is proceeding with the establishment of this observatory, which will be beneficial for all Guineans.
Meanwhile, political parties and members of the Forces Vive of Guinea boycotted the ceremony. According to them, this approach aims to impose a non-consensual constitution that could pave the way for a possible candidacy of General Mamadou Doumbouya, head of the transitional government. With 1 month before the referendum, the political climate remains tense in Guinea.
Abdullah Hassan with the details of Journal Alpha Ibrahim Balde's report from Conakry. In Togo, a civil rights group known as the Martin Luther King Movement MLK is raising concerns over the recurring ban on public demonstrations in the country. In a statement issued on Wednesday, the organization described the prolonged prohibition, recalled that ban was first imposed by the state during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. It terms the prolonged sanction as an attack on fundamental rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Togolese constitution and international treaties. The movement's statement comes ahead of a major demonstration scheduled for this weekend in the capital, Lomé. Here is an excerpt of Pastor Edo Komi, a leader of Martin Luther King Movement MLK.
Depuis 2020, avec l'avènement de la pandémie.
Since 2020, with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, freedom of the rights of demonstration have been restricted. To this date, the prohibitions have not been officially lifted. All the marches have been purely and simply prohibitive. So the Martin Luther King movement is concerned about this as an organization of human rights and demands the uplifting of the definitive ban on demonstrations.
Définitive d'interdiction de manifestation. Le MMLK exhorte
the Martin Luther King movement is exhorting the Togolese leaders and institutions of the Republic, especially the National Commission on Human Rights, the Ministry of Human Rights and others, to guarantee the fundamental principles of democracy and the rule of law. So for us, it is an alert to tell the Togolese authorities that they need to free up the citizen space so that democracy and the rule of law that we are talking about can become a reality.
Pastor Edo Komi, a leader of Martin Luther King movement there. You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar and online on wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Ivorian opposition parties react to President Ouattra's Independence Day address. Guinea-Bissau President Embalo dismisses government, appoints new prime minister ahead of elections. Ghana mourns as government honors victims of fatal helicopter crash. Martin Luther King movement denounces reoccurring ban on public demonstrations in Togo. Still ahead in the news, we do have guest interview and sport news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let's now focus on health matters. In Liberia, there are widespread concerns and criticism regarding proposed financial charges for obtaining medical services at the John F. Kennedy Memorial Hospital, the country's largest referral health center. A leaked internal memo from the government hospital revealed that effective August 1, the hospital administration scrapped its policy of providing free medical care for children under 5 and now demands pregnant women to make upfront payments before being admitted. This decision has drawn significant criticism from Liberians, political figures, and civil society organizations who fear the impact it may have on citizens struggling with high cost of living in the country. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
The proposed financial charges include $25 for admission, $90 for a C-section, $65 for intra-medical supplies, and $20 for routine laboratory tests, all payable before treatment. While the hospital management has since labeled a proposal in response to public pressure, many Liberians who rely on the government health center for medical services are expressing disappointment over the charges.
For 0 to 5 years free.
For children under 5 years, used to be free. A child who gets pregnant age 14 and when she gave birth, the hospital management used to give them gifts. But now that they are cancelling those services, it is actually a bad one. For me, I got children, twins, and I find it difficult to cater to their bills. Sometimes when we go to the hospital, we don't have transportation to go home. And now JFK is adding fees. At the same time, Jos Kilikbo, Executive Director of Public Health Initiative Liberia, questions the hospital's ability to manage its operations despite receiving budgetary support.
Such a policy action is detrimental to the health of bulk of the population. It's going to push more people further into poverty, and also it's almost like a death sentence for most Liberian people that are living from hand to mouth. Liberia is among those countries that should put in more effort to ensure we adhere adhere to the WHO Health for All policy, that no one should incur hardship.
In response to the situation, the pro-tempore of the Liberian Senate, Yomli Kanga Lawrence, calls on the hospital management to reconsider the financial charges. At the moment, the situation remains fluid as the potential alterations to the policies at the JFK Memorial Hospital highlight the ongoing challenges of providing affordable health care in Liberia. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Still on health issues, a serious foodborne illness continues to escalate in the Baz Mono prefecture located in southeastern Togo. The outbreak, which began on July 27, 2025, has resulted in the deaths of 2 individuals and hospitalization of several others. According to recently released analysis, the source of the infection has been linked to contaminated food, among other contributing factors. Augustine Colley tells us more.
The epidemiological investigation conducted by the National Institute of Hygiene in Togo identified the cause of contamination as polybacteria involving multiple pathogenic microorganisms. According to health authorities, samples of the investigation were collected from 3 sources, which include contaminated food, the stools of hospitalized patients, and water from a local household. The contaminated food in question is beef blood broth, a traditional dish widely consumed by residents of the region. Additional toxicological analyses are currently being carried out at the University of Lomé to gather more information about the recent foodborne illness in the southeastern part of the country. Simultaneously, the National Institute of Hygiene is conducting a study to accurately identify all the bacterial strains involved. These further investigations are intended to help health authorities better understand the source of the food poisoning and enable them to formulate conclusions and recommendations to curtail further spread of the outbreak.
Augustine Colley with that report. The government of Niger and Chad are enhancing their bilateral cooperation in several key areas, including security, energy, infrastructure, and the free movement of people. This development followed the final communique issued after a meeting between Transitional President General Abdurrahman Tiani of Niger and his Chadian counterpart, Mahamat Idris Déby Etno, who is on a 48-hour visit to Niamey. In terms of security, both leaders agreed to strengthen coordination between their defense and security forces, particularly regarding the Lake Chad Basin region. Economically, Niger has committed to supplying Chad with diesel with transit arrangements pending a customs agreement. In the field of infrastructure, both parties have acknowledged the progress made in fiber optic interconnection and have committed to ensuring mutual access to submarine cables and interconnecting their data centers.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
Now let's move to the guest interview today, because President Alassane Ouattara's Independence Day speech is drawing mixed reactions across Côte d'Ivoire just 2 months ahead of the high-stakes October elections. While he reaffirmed the government's high commitment to a credible vote, critics note a key omission: no mention of inclusive dialogue with the opposition. In a nation long marked by political tensions, the absence of such a gesture has raised concerns about the government's willingness to foster consensus ahead of the polls. So how significant is this omission in the broader political context of Côte d'Ivoire? What does it reveal about the administration's current posture? And what might it mean for the political stability in the months to come? Well, Austin Ibe is Wadr's liaison officer for ECOWAS.
The omission of President Ouattara in that Independence Day speech was intentional. He intentionally and overtly avoided mentioning it because in Ouattara's subconsciousness, he does not have opposition. What exists in Côte d'Ivoire is government in power, and the incumbent is going to be elected president. Recall that President Ouattara, before President Ouattara announced his bid for a 3rd term, the atmosphere, particularly the political atmosphere, has been a bit easy. It was a bit peaceful. Tension had not risen. The moment President Ouattara announced his bid, where he accepted the call by his party and kinsmen to contest, tension has started brewing, including the arrest of opposition leaders. Right now, what you probably will be hearing from Cote d'Ivoire is increased tension arising from deliberate targeting of opposition political candidates. And as we draw close to the election days, to the election day, more of that tension will increase, violence will erupt, because like we all know, Cote d'Ivoire has an history of electoral violence, and this election coming is not going to be an exception, because the factor that always lead to violence remain constant, which is President Alassane Ouattara. His bid is already creating an uncertainty in the political architecture among the Ivorian people. And its deliberate omission of the opposition in that speech is a clear signal that there's no opposition right now in this country.
Given Cote d'Ivoire's history of election-related tensions and the current climate of political uncertainty, how might the absence of direct engagement with opposition parties in the president's address impact public trust, especially in the credibility and inclusiveness of the upcoming election?
The opposition candidates and all of the opposition parties need to be able to converge and have a unified front. Any fragmentation within the opposition rank will not amount to anything. And I think that's where the problem is. On the credibility and inclusivity of the election, again, it is important to state that you cannot have a credible election when an incumbent is engaged in all form of democratic backsliding, including media attack, dissent voice attack, opposition party attack, or opposition candidate attack. So there cannot be a fair and free process in that election. An election that omits fairness cannot be credible. And for inclusion, unless the president will now have to act on his magnanimity, because he controls all the forces in the country. We will now need to use his magnanimity to include maybe opposition political party candidates and of course members when he finally wins the election in October. As it is today, opposition parties are not able to organize properly because Ouattara will not allow them to organize. That is exactly what happened in the previous elections, and that is what will likely happen in this election.
Austin Ebe is Wadr's liaison officer for ECOWAS. And in sports, everyone is talking about the prestigious Ballon d'Or nominations, which was revealed by organizers of France Football. And we have two African players, I must say, in Guinea's Sehu Guirassy and Morocco's Achraf Hakimi. Interesting times. In the studio, of course, to talk about this is no other than Christopher Atichu. Christopher.
Sankule Janko. Bonsoir.
I don't know who. Bonsoir.
Yeah.
I don't know who. I'm sure you're excited, but I don't know who.
Well, I'm very excited because Chelsea's Cole Palmer is also in the nomination, although he's not in the ultimate. But at least we have something to be proud
Cole Palmer
about.
is nowhere near the main contender, so please.
Yes, we know that. We know that. Okay. But of course, it is very important to state that Chelsea's Cole Palmer is in there.
I agree.
And FIFA World Cup champion.
And no Man United player is in the list.
You are very right.
So please give us up to date.
Well, yes. So before we do the Ballon d'Or development, let's bring our listeners what is happening in the ongoing CHAN tournament as the Democratic Republic of Congo reignited their Total Energies CAF African Nations Championship CHAN Moja 2024 campaign with a commanding 2-0 victory over Zambia in their second Group A match today in the tournament. And the win also marks the second or the end of a 5-match winless run for the DRC at the CHAN tournament, thereby inflicting the first ever inflicting lots of pains for the defeated side, which is the Zambia national team. But again, tomorrow there are some actions to happen as Angola will be taking on Kenya. As well as, but that match actually happened today, Angola, Kenya, and it was at the end of it, it was a 1-goal apiece for both sides. But tomorrow, Algeria will be taking on South Africa, and then Guinea would also take on Uganda. Now, let's talk about the most anticipated football tournament of the year to happen on September 22, 2025 in Paris, which is the Ballon d'Or event. And Sankule, you have much more development in there. As you rightly said, Dembele is actually leading the contenders for the prize following his dazzling campaign for PSG. PSG this season to win the Champions League glory in Munich.
Of course, but aside from Dembele, there are other very interesting contenders. We have Lamine Yamal. I mean, we have Rafinha, Barcelona and Brazil, as well as Achraf Hakimi, of course. But for so many football pundits, they make the content, the real, competition is between Francis Ousmane Dembele, who was phenomenal, who won the Champions League, as well as the Ligue 1 with France, of course, the French side, Paris Saint-Germain. But Lamine Yamal is also a serious contender, as well as Rafinha, his teammate Rafinha and Achraf Hakimi. As an African, I would love Hakimi to take this gong home. But do you think that's possible?
Well, if Hakim does that, it means he becomes the second African, because at the moment we all boast of Liberia's
Augustine Collis.
George Weah.
All right, that's it for sports with Augustine Collis. Thank you very much, Christopher Aticho. Well, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Umu Danyogo for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X and Instagram at WDR News, on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our environment program, Enviroscope with Abdullah Hassan. I am Sankule Janko. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Gulf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.